Hi, welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I've got a double feature for you. 1990s science fiction. One's a monster movie, one's a space opera. One's comedic, the other one's got comedic parts in it, but they're both very much 1990s science fiction films. So without further ado, let's start with 1996's Space Truckers. It stars Dennis Hopper, Debbie Mazar, Stephen Dorff, and Charles Dance. And it was made in Ireland under a deal where there were a lot of tax breaks for making films in Ireland. And it was directed by Stuart Gordon, who did Reanimator and a whole bunch of those other Lovecraftian adaptations, including Dagon. The story, which I'm going to read off Wikipedia, says, the story concerns John Canyon, one of the last independent space transport entrepreneurs. Bad times have forced him to carry a suspicious cargo to Earth without asking any questions. During the flight, the cargo turns out to be a multitude of virtually unstoppable killer robots. This movie had a lot of trouble being made. For a start, they didn't really have a studio and they didn't have a special effects workshop to work with, so the production created their own in a factory in County Wicklow in Ireland. There's a good establishing shot at the start of this one too, which zooms in on a base on the Neptunian moon of Triton, where an evil scientist played by Charles Dance has created killer robots for a dubious businessman whose name is Sags, E.J. Sags, played by Shane Rimmer, who people might remember did a lot of the voices for the Thunderbirds TV series back in the 1960s. So there's a nice establishing shot and a demonstration of what the big bad's going to be in the movie. And then we cut to Dennis Hopper's John Canyon in his pachyderm space truck delivering square pigs to a space station somewhere in the outer solar system. The square pigs are really horrible. They don't look happy and they don't look nice, but Canyon gets on well with them. He gives one of them part of a hot dog, which may be cannibalism, but he gives you the idea that he's the last of the independent contractors. He's his own man and he does things his own way. He gets into a lot of trouble with the large company that owns the pigs, Interpork, whose representative was played by George Wendt, who was in Cheers, and who ends badly. He ends up doing a Goldfinger when the pressurized window of a donut-shaped diner blows out and sucks him out into space. Not the best way to go. There's so much of this movie that does a lot with a little. The sets are quite good for the budget and quite good for the time too. They do a section of the diner, which is basically a rotating donut to give it some gravity. And they have a fairly large and quite well shot set of the curvature of this space diner, which I love. I think it's an imaginative concept. It's done really well. And the production design has a really nice aesthetic, which owes a little bit probably to anime, but also owes a little bit to magazines like Heavy Metal from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Kenya has a somewhat flirtatious relationship with one of the waitresses at the diner, Cindy, played by Debbie Mazar, who is one of the most valuable players in this one. She needs to get to Earth because her mother is having an operation, is just coming out of hospital. Reluctantly, Canyon agrees to take her to Earth when he gets a contract to take some mysterious cargo back there. There's a younger trucker called Mike, played by Stephen Dorff. He comes along with the team because basically all of them are in trouble because George Wendt got sucked out of a window. And as they travel along, they first chased by the cops and then captured by a pirate ship while they're trying to take this cargo to Earth. And meanwhile, the cargo activates. And these killer biomechanical androids start heading towards the cabin of the truck. They meet a pirate called Captain Macanudo and his enormous spaceship. He's played by Charles Dance, who turns up at the start of the film as well. And he is at least 50% machine and quite okay with that in a very strange way. And this is Charles Dance doing a light role. Earlier in the decade, of course, he'd done The Last Action Hero and playing the bad in that. And he seems to have some fun with this one as well. And he is creepy as hell. His attempts at seduction of Cindy are kind of funny but kind of icky at the same time. But I think both of the actors, Debbie Mazar and Charles Dance, play that quite well. This is a typical 1990s B picture, VHS era B picture, and a B science fiction picture when There was so much out there to watch, but not all of it was good, but some of it was fun, and this one's fun. The computer-generated effects on it are of their time, which you've got to accept. The miniature work is quite good. I like the design of a lot of the miniatures, and I like the world building in this. The fact that to get into the space station, you've got to go past a whole bunch of weird billboards. And the interior of the truck that John drives is well thought out. It's got some interesting designs to it. And even though it's clearly been done on a limited budget with technicians who are learning their job on the job, it still has a feel about it where you can respect the fact that they took care to build this world a little more carefully than many, many other movies of this kind at the time. A lot of the movies that Charles Band, New Moon Pictures did weren't quite as adept at that kind of world building as Space Truckers is. Eventually they get to Earth and there's a nice little ending there, which is kind of sweet and cute. Yeah, let's get an end to this thing and get rid of the bad guy, kind of hurried about it. But it's not a particularly long movie. How long is it? Let me have a look here. 95 minutes, so it's 1 hour 35 minutes. And it tells the story well. My issues are a couple of things. Stephen Dorff and Dennis Hopper are not bringing their A game to this one. It's kind of low-key. I wanted Dennis Hopper's character, John Kenyon, to be a little more manic, a little more crazy, independent guy, and he doesn't bring that. This is a time when Dennis Hopper was cashing checks. He was doing shit like the Super Mario Brothers and Waterworld and those kind of films. He was cashing checks playing minor league villains, and I don't think he saw that this one had a possibility of being better than it was if he had lifted his game a bit. And Stephen Dorff was just playing the young, cute guy character, not really stretching himself at all. But on the other hand, Debbie Mazar is great playing Cindy. She's not taking any shit, and she delivers the comic lines beautifully. And Charles Dance does as well. So in a sense, it's a missed opportunity. I think the Dennis Hopper character should have had a little bit more in it, in the same way that Bruce Willis's character, Corbin Dallas in The Fifth Element, gave us just that little bit more so that we could kind of like the character and be more engaged with it. There's a little bit less of that in this that I really would have liked there to be. But it's entertaining. It's a lot of fun to watch. It does exactly what you expect it to do and no more. If you want to just watch a B picture from the 1990s, which is a bit of a space opera and a bit different and seen from a working class point of view, which was one of the points that Stuart Gordon, the director, wanted to get across, is, show the working class of the future. Don't just show the rich people and the chosen ones and the people who have a title. And I appreciated that about this film, in the same sense that so much of The Expanse is working class space opera. That brings things 2 years forward to 1998 and Stephen Sommers' great monster movie, Deep Rising, starring Treat Williams, Famke Janssen, Wes Studi, and a whole bunch of other character actors, in a movie about a giant ocean liner which came out within weeks of Titanic, which didn't do it any favours. Treat Williams plays a boat captain called Finnegan who has an old patrol boat which he hires out for illegal purposes in the South China Sea. A guy called Hanover, played by Wes Studi, hires the boat, loads it up with mercenaries and torpedoes, and ties the boat to take them to a certain point of the ocean for a rendezvous about which Finnegan doesn't know anything. It turns out the rendezvous point is a giant luxury ocean liner called Argonautica, which is owned by a guy called Canton, played by Anthony Held, which has undergone an unusual disruption. Someone on board has sabotaged the ship to make it stop in the middle of the ocean so that Hanover and his crew can do whatever it is they need to do, and there's a bit of a mystery about that. After the boat is stopped by the saboteur, something hits the boat from beneath. We see a really interesting first kill in this one, a woman sitting on a toilet, and then we cut back to Finnegan and these mercenaries, and there's also a jewel thief called Trillium, played by Famke Janssen, who is robbing the vault aboard the ship when things start going pear-shaped. She's caught by the captain and the owner and locked up in a brig which is being used to store food, and so she doesn't get affected by whatever is affecting the rest of the ship. Finnegan and the mercenaries have an accident. They hit a speedboat which has fallen off the ship, and they end up with a hole in the patrol boat's hull. They've got to get to the ship and do some repairs before they can go away again. They got on board and there's nobody aboard. They can't find anybody. They can find some blood but they can't find the people. And they do find Trillian and team up with her. They find the captain and the owner and team up with them in order to figure out what's going on and find their way off the ship as the monsters start attacking. Now, the supporting cast in this one is pretty cool too. The mechanic aboard the little patrol boat is a guy called Joey, played by Kevin J. O'Connor, who is the comic relief, but he's also a character who gets a few interesting emotional beats in there as well. He's a lot of fun. And the supporting characters playing the mercs are kind of interesting. You've got Jason Fleming playing Mulligan, one of the mercenaries. Cliff Curtis is there in an early Hollywood role, playing a guy called Mamuli, who is of kind of vague ethnicity. Cliff Curtis in any Hollywood film does not play a Maori. And we get Jimon Honsu in an early role too, playing Vivo, one of the other mercs, who gets an interesting death. And there's another guy who's ostensibly Australian, a guy called T-Ray, played by an actor called Trevor Goddard, who was kind of interesting. He died of a drug overdose in 2003 and spent a lot of his career in movies pretending to be an Australian even though he was an Englishman. And I watched the movie and I thought, this guy's Australian accent is slightly off. Not enough for an American to notice, but there's something not quite right about the Australian accent. So I did my research. He pretended to be an Australian to get acting roles in the 1990s, which apart from being dishonest, pisses me off because there are many Australian actors who needed gigs. But leaving that aside, the movie works well. We get the reveal of the monsters. The CG work is pretty good for the 1990s. Not as good as it would be were it made now, but on the other hand, this is like 26, 27 years old. And so particularly where there are water effects along with the CG monsters, the water effects make themselves known. And there are also a few issues with color grading in some of the scenes where people are interacting with the monsters. But again, this is the 1990s and we kind of accept that. Now, the movie has an interesting tone too. It's a tone that continued in Stephen Sommers' movies afterwards, where he did the Mummy series, for instance, where you have not only monstrous and scary stuff, but you have serious stuff, and you also have that light comedic tone at times and likable protagonists. And Treat Williams is a likable protagonist as Finnegan, and he and Famke Janssen have a nice rapport as well. And she gets to play a sexy but competent character, which is kind of cool. She can pick locks, she can do a whole bunch of other things. She's a very skilled thief, and that skill is useful to the survivors of this very unusual incident. But with a movie like this, also you finally get the reveal of the biggest of the big bads in the movie, and that's kind of impressive too. It smacks a little bit of Lovecraftianness, though that isn't explicitly stated in the text. But it becomes one of those interesting things where you've got the ongoing mysteries like who sabotaged the ship, what the hell is this monster, but you also have that other fun aspect as well, which is who's going to die next and how are they going to die, and imaginative kills are what this kind of monster movie is all about. And we get some really good ones, particularly toward the end, where Studi's character's death is one of those great oh shit kind of endings to a person's life in one of these kind of movies. I didn't like to see Cliff Curtis going as early as he did. I think that he as an actor has so much to give and mad skills as an actor, both comedically and dramatically. There's a shame that he didn't actually get to do a little bit more with it than he did. This movie did badly at the box office because everybody was watching Titanic. I didn't, but everybody else was. In fact, I've never seen Titanic all the way through. I did see bits of Titanic when I was working for a cable TV company because you'd see it up on the screens all the time. So I saw Titanic, probably the whole movie, in like 5-minute bits between phone calls when I was working at a call center. But I've never seen it all the way through. But I think that for me, this movie works. By the way, the monster in this is called an octolus. That's the name the movie gives to it. And in fact, that was the title in a number of other markets. Deep Rising wasn't the title in Europe, for instance. But this one works for me for a few reasons. First off, you've got engaging characters. Secondly, you've got a cool concept. Thirdly, you've got your comic relief exactly where it should be, and the movie knows what kind of movie it is. You've got some really great monsters, and you've also got a little bit at the end which hints at a potential sequel that never happened. That potential sequel was going to be a version of King Kong made by Stephen Sommers, which never eventuated, and eventually, of course, Peter Jackson got to make a King Kong movie. I like that ending, and it's a shame that there wasn't a sequel to this film of some kind, because I think that Trillian and Finnegan, the two lead romantic leads, and Joey, the sidekick, would have been good for another movie or two. They have a lot of the dynamic that you got with the protagonists in the Mummy movies. I think they would have been something of their own had they been able to make another film of this. But it was a lot of fun to watch it. It works well. It hits the right plot beats. It gives us a great monster, which is creepy as hell. And it does some interesting stunt work as well. All props to the stunt performers in this movie, because there's a lot of really dangerous looking stunts that happen in this one. But just to summarise the two of the films, good double feature, good 90s double feature. You could sit down and watch them and be happy, because I was. And I enjoyed them, and I could see things in them that I hadn't seen previously. And I could also see, in some cases, the weaknesses of them, but those weaknesses were more a weakness of resources rather than conceptual weaknesses, and maybe not prodding a couple of the actors in the arse with a cattle prod. They're good together. They're a lot of fun to watch. They're not the best science fiction movies in the world, but they do exactly what they're intended to do, which is entertain an audience. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what you think of these films. You can also support the channel by donating at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. Happy for you to do that. I've got a few extras planned for the Patreon supporters again, so you'll get those if you are a Patreon supporter. If you're not, unfortunately, you may have to wait a year or two before I put them out. Until next time around, when I'm doing some more TV series I like again, I'm going to do some more of those. Until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some 1990s B pictures that you kind of half forgotten about but you really enjoyed. And I'll catch you next time.